Hey guys, here we go. It's time for poem 11, a short poem, but still plenty of things to talk about. So as per usual, I will read through the poem and then we'll break it down and talk about its imagery and symbolism, etc. It would be helpful if you had your book to follow along as we go. Poem 11. 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. Shape the clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes it useful. Cut doors and windows for a room. It is the holes that make it useful. Therefore, profit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there. So by looking at that poem, you'll notice that there is clearly some repetition here, and one of the things is the word useful. So we have three images provided to us that all basically make the same point. So if you think about a hub of a wheel now, and again, maybe think back to 2,500 years ago in ancient China where the wheel would have been something that is attached to a wagon. There are many parts to a wheel. There's the spokes, there's the outside rim, and there is the center point that the axle goes through. So without that center point through which the axle goes, a wheel is pretty much useless. I mean, spokes are great and the outside of it is great, but it doesn't serve its purpose. It becomes useless. But the thing that's interesting about that is that what we're talking about here, as with all these examples, is empty space, right? So, let's talk about the second one. Shape the clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes it useful. And so actually I have some pieces of pottery here from my childhood. There's a place outside of the town I grew up in Tulsa, called Frankoma Pottery, and it made, clay pottery. So here we have a small, I'm sure there's probably a very special name for it. I don't know what it is. You would put liquid in it. Maybe it's a gravy boat. And then also I have a clay tea kettle here. It's very nice. Lovely craftsmanship. A little pot, a little lid, but nothing's inside of it. So these two things by themselves really don't do much. I mean, you could set them on a shelf and they might look nice, and maybe to me they have some value because they are associated with my childhood and with my home. But by themselves, just sitting there on a shelf, they don't do much. I mean, they collect dust well. It is only when something is placed within the tea kettle. So only when we put water in it and then tea and then boil it to make some tea does this vessel become useful, right? So oddly enough, it is the empty space that is important, not the outside. The outside is important because it gives shape to what is placed within it. But by itself, the outside is just a shell. And then our last example is cut doors and windows for a room. It is the holes that make it useful. Again, it's a similar concept, right? To my right here, and the reason why half my face is illuminated is a window. And it's a lovely day outside. I can see that it is sunny, and I see an oleander blooming outside my window. And so it is not the frame of the window that's important, but it is the empty space in between that frame that is important. It is what makes it useful. Same with the door that is to my left over here. Yes, the frame is important, but it is that empty space, right? That empty space that makes it useful. So we kind of end up with one of these contradictions, which of course there are many within the Tao Te Ching, and one is that emptiness is useful. And it is kind of an interesting concept, philosophically. There are many places that are empty that have great meaning and purpose. Although this example maybe is not great meaning and purpose, but I sure would like one about now. Let's talk about donuts. So donuts, they're round, they have a hole in the middle. I know, I'm telling you some pretty earth-shattering things. Now there's something you can buy at a donut shop called donut holes. Now ironically, a donut hole has no hole in it. It is made from the hole that is in the middle of the donut. In the middle of the donut, there is empty space. Nothing. I don't know how useful and empty, I don't know how useful the donut hole is, like the empty space. But nonetheless, it is kind of funny to think about the things that they sell called donut holes are in fact a thing. Technically, a donut hole is nothing. But even though there is this nothing that is a donut hole, it is something, even though it's nothing. It might not be the best example to talk about with what we're talking about. I don't know why I'm bringing up a donut hole. The book seems to provide 3 examples that are just fine. And so you get the point. It is the empty space that is within that gives this vessel meaning, or rather, usefulness. So now let's look at these last 2 lines, which are a little confusing. I don't know that the first 6 lines are necessarily that confusing per se, although it's kind of an interesting concept, thinking of nothingness or empty space as being something that is useful. But as you have probably noticed with a lot of these poems, they sort of end up at a place where they make a final point. And so here we have these last 2 lines that I want to talk about and unpack because they're a little confusing, and we'll reference another translation to hopefully make some sense of it. Okay, so last 2 lines. Therefore, profit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there. Well, this is the fourth time in the poem the word useful or usefulness has popped up. So therefore, profit comes from what is there. Now, this vessel is what's there, or here. You can see it, you can look at it, you can touch it, you can feel it's cold, or I can. But usefulness is from what is not there. We've kind of talked about that already in this poem, but let me use a different translation to maybe make a more profound point about these last few lines. From the Chin translation, these are the last 2 lines. Therefore, in the being of a thing, there lies the benefit. In the non-being of a thing, there lies its use. So, it uses a different word there, being. Now we're familiar with this word being. You're a human being. This thing that we experience, our life, is called being. We are being in the world. When you grow as a child, you are growing into being, right? So we know what being is, and then we know what non-being is, which is we no longer exist as a being. So again, that second to last line, therefore in the being of a thing, there lies the benefit. This is kind of like the power to function in a being, the power to function, to act, to work, to serve, right? These are functions that a being carries out. But these functions come from the non-being. Because it is contained within the being. Think of ourselves as this, as an empty vessel, right? That on the outside there is this husk, this shell, but on the inside, though we know there's all kinds of physical things on the inside of ourselves, you might say the inside of our being is that place where our true self dwells. And so, the power to function, the being of a thing, to act and work and to serve, comes from the non-being contained within the being. The thing that is within you, or you might even say you yourself, is the thing that makes the outside, the shell, useful, functionable, right? To do the good things that we are to do. The usefulness of a being is measured by how much non-being is contained within it. So if you think about the usefulness of a being, you likely have people in your life who are continually giving and expansive in their love and joy and happiness to all people, even when it's not happiness, even in sadness, in dark times. They are giving of themselves. It is their non-being, the thing that is within the vessel, that gives the vessel purpose. It is these types of people, and hopefully you, in your journey, are growing into being in that way, of your non-being becoming expansive. The greater the non-being, the greater the usefulness, the greater the outside self, the being, you, me, the greater impact we can have on the world and those around us that we love. So if you think of, like, again, our cute little tea kettle, and it's really small. If this were 5 times the size, it might take longer to boil the water, but certainly you could serve more people with it. And so perhaps it is the non-being and the expansive nature of that non-being, which has no defined walls. The greater that non-being, and you might say, along with the theory or the theme of the ego, the less the ego, the greater the non-being, the more profit you can give to the world. Because guess what? It's not about you. It's about others. Alright guys, thanks for listening. I hope to see you soon. Like, I literally hope to see you soon. Y'all take care. Bye. What is there is this pot. I'm really not good. And so here we have these last 2 limes. Limes? What is happening? I can't even do my hair. I can touch it, tink it. So you get the point here, right? It's that the empty space within, right, is what's their non-being. God, I wish I could get this right.